Good afternoon. My name is Burton Lim, Assistant Curator in the Department of Natural History at the Royal Ontario Museum, and one of the curatorial team members who worked on the new exhibition, Great Whales Up Close and Personal, that's showing now. Glad you can join us for today's Curators Conversations, a digital program that explores themes and subjects from ROM research and collections alongside museum and industrial professionals. Thank you to TD for their ongoing support of this program. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the ROM sits on what has been the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabeg Nation, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation since time immemorial to today. Our virtual event today is in support of our current exhibition, Great Whales Up Close and Personal, open now until next year, March 20th. Thank you to lead exhibition patron Nita and Don Reed and family, and supporting sponsor Newfoundland and Labrador for making this exhibition possible. We would also like to acknowledge the support of our Royal Exhibition Circle donors. My guest for today's conversation is Bill Schutt, who is a vertebrate zoologist with a specialty in anatomy. He's the author of 5 books on fiction and nonfiction, including the New York Times Editor's Choice, Cannibalism, A Perfect Natural History. Recently retired and now emeritus professor of biology at Long Island University. He is also a research associate at the American Museum of Natural History. I know Bill because of his studies on bats, in particular vampire bats. His research and writings have been featured in Natural History magazine, as well as in the New York Times, Newsday, The Economist, and Discover. Bill's newest book, Pump, A Natural History of the Heart, takes readers on a fantastic trip around the world, telling an incredible story of evolution and scientific process, and includes the story of the ROM's unique blue whale heart. During the program, please submit your questions via the Q&A feature on screen, and we'll have some time at the end to answer these. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Bill Schutt to Curator Conversations. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us, Bill.
Really nice to be here, Burton. Great, always great to see you.
So I think we need to do full disclosure at the beginning here, because we've known each other for years and years and years because of our mutual interest in research on bats. So we've met at quite a few conferences and other places over the years. So you've published scientific papers on vampire bats and written a book on cannibalism. So I know you like the cool macabre things, but what inspired you to write about the heart in your current book?
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a stretch for me, and certainly I thought it was initially. But with the success of cannibalism, you know, what I think I had, what I tried to do, and what I think I did was to sort of find a niche where I could take something that was complex or misunderstood and demystify it and put a zoological slant on it. So when it came time to come up with a new topic for my next book. I had all of these strange ideas that I won't even go into right now, but my agent, Jillian McKenzie, and my editors at Algonquin suggested that they gave me a list of things that were a bit more mainstream. And so I went through the list, and when I came to the heart, I initially thought, well, this really has to have been done. There are so many books about the heart that I don't know if I can figure out something that's weird enough or interesting enough to tell the types of stories that I like to tell. And I was quickly and happily surprised to find out that there were really no books that went through the evolution of the heart. Talking about it in layman's terms, then looking at the history of cardiac medicine and things like the belief in that the heart is the center of the human being and you know, the center of intellect and memory and emotion. And then to go into some of the medieval practices with regard to the heart and beliefs at that time, and modern, modern medicine and even medicine of the future. I just found so many interesting topics to talk about that you know, the initial worry that I had that it wouldn't be strange enough quickly went out the window.
Well, I think all your books are all these sort of unique and I guess a little bit off the beaten track type topics. Yeah, so people out there that want to get a little bit more in depth into not your everyday type of subjects. I think all your books sort of hit on different things. So I think that's really cool.
Thanks.
My current book starts off with the blue whale heart that the ROM salvaged in 2014 from Newfoundland. And you actually came up to Toronto to specifically see this heart. So I know it's from the largest species that has ever lived, but were you prepared for how huge it was?
Um, yeah, first of all, the thing is, as you can see, the background there, it's not very spectacular. The background is not too incredible, because I came up in August 2018, and the exhibition had closed already. So Bill Hodgkinson, who works with you at the ROM, was nice enough to uncrate this thing. And unfortunately, you weren't around, Burton, so I didn't get to interview you, but I did spend a lot of quality time with Mark Ingstrom and with Jackie Miller, and they were incredibly helpful. So I thought it was an intriguing story from the start. And when I saw it, of course, I was blown away. The amount of work and just how beautiful the heart looks, that was to me staggering. The way that the blood vessels are, in a sense, color coded, with a silicone polymer that's colored, and just the fantastic look of the thing. And it was a lot bigger, really, than I thought. I'd read these measurements that it was going to be 42 inches high and 38 inches across. But I wasn't prepared for this thing to be standing above my head, and that was because of these the amazing work that they did on the blood vessels. But just being able to look inside that heart and see, you can actually see in that photo up there now, what are commonly known as heartstrings that hold down these valves. And when we talk about human valves, you're looking at something that's about the size of a quarter, but here they were I think I described them as the size of a child's drum. And just the whole look of the heart, it's not bifurcated. This is bifurcated. It doesn't, it doesn't have that sort of shape that you see if you go to a butcher and get a beef heart or something like that. And to me, what I learned was that the heart was a lot smaller than what you guys at the ROM and people elsewhere thought it was going to be. And that to me was one of the most intriguing stories that was clearly not a story that I was prepared for. And what the researchers now believe, what you now, I guess, hypothesize, is that if you're looking at something like a hummingbird that beats its wings 80 times per second, you've got to supply a lot of blood to those muscles. One way to do it is to crank up the heart rate. And we think that the heart rate of a hummingbird is about maxed out for what a heart can do. And if you think of the heart as a machine, like 1,200 beats per minute, that's ridiculous. So the only other way to get more blood to those wing muscles is to have a larger heart. So in reality, if you had a hummingbird if you had a hummingbird sitting next to that blue whale and it was, and blew it up to a tremendous size, the heart of the hummingbird would be 8 times larger than the blue whale heart. And that just, that to me was amazing. And those are the types of stories that I like to tell. And, the punchline to that is because of the hummingbird's metabolism is so high that it has these requirements that a blue whale, which beats, heart beats, 10, 15 times per minute, maybe even less when it dives, the blue whale doesn't really have to meet those energy demands that, say, a hummingbird or a tiny little shrew might have to cope with on a regular basis. So yeah, I was completely blown away by the heart but other aspects of it from what I initially thought I might be blown away by.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing the research for originally the blue whale exhibition, but now the great whales exhibition, we came across a lot of, so-called facts or myths, however you want to put it. And, one of them was, the blue whale heart is, the size of a Cadillac. But we found out, no, it's more like a golf cart or a smart car. And we actually had a smart car in the blue whale exhibition to give you an idea of the size of it. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there that that sort of gets blown out of proportion, and the blue whale heart was one of them. But it's great that you tell us that, a hummingbird heart, even though it's very small, if you just sort of sized it up, it would actually be really huge. But I wouldn't want to see a bird that big, though.
That would take up most of that hall, I think.
So a pump, a natural history of the heart is the title of your book. But you also talk about, more than just the heart. You talk about the whole circulation system. So they obviously are linked, but a lot of times they may not be as clear cut or defined as found in humans. So what is the range of variation that is seen in hearts, and circulation systems out there in nature?
Well, first of all, when you define a heart, that to me, there's some gray area there, because if you were to go to a cardiologist and show him the heart of a horseshoe crab or an insect, they would probably look at you like you were crazy, because they have these specific requirements for what a card-carrying heart would be, and those are things like a specialized lining that you need to see in order to call this thing a heart. But across the animal kingdom, especially the invertebrates, and so we're talking about animals without a backbone, there were, I believe these types of pumps that circulate a fluid around the body in order to carry oxygen and to get rid of carbon dioxide and deliver nutrients and get rid of waste products. You're going to see a tremendous amount of variation there, from something that looks like just almost like an oversized blood vessel that when it contracts. And the way I describe this is sort of think of I'm holding right now a filled water balloon, and when my fingers are the muscles, and when they contract, they squeeze on that fluid inside the water balloon and send it in a different direction. So that's about as simple as circulatory systems get, but they all get the job done, and that's a key point for me. We think in terms of the human heart and the human circulatory system being the pinnacle of evolution, and I think we really need to move away from that, because even within the vertebrates, the fish and the amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals, you've got variation there, and they all work really well for the job that they evolved to do. And it's the same story when you're talking about an insect heart or the aortic arches of an earthworm. So among the inverts, because hearts evolved so many times, I believe, and circulatory systems, you've got this tremendous amount of variation. So I wasn't writing an encyclopedia, but I went in and looked at some of what I thought were the really intriguing aspects of circulatory systems in the animals that don't have backbones, like squid, for example, have 3 hearts. That's wild. They've got 2 hearts that pump blood to the gills, and then another heart that pumps blood to the body. And then when you get into the vertebrates, there's less variation, because we believe that hearts evolved from one common ancestor in the vertebrates. So there was a lot of neat stuff there, and I was able to sort of riff on it and go into some side topics as well. But I really think it's important that we realize that just because we see something that is not a human heart or doesn't look like a human heart, like the blue whale heart, I describe it in there as like a 383-pound soup dumpling, because it just kind of collapsed when you guys brought it out of the animal. And that to me is wild. Why did it do that? Well, I mean, I guess it's been hypothesized that has something to do with the pressure that the whales undergo when they dive deeply. So when you're only beating 2 or 3 times a minute, you don't have to maintain this strong muscular structure that's going to pump blood, because you don't really need to. So there's just so much there that was intriguing across the animal kingdom.
Well, I love soup dumplings, but now I'm gonna look at them a little bit differently now that you describe it that way, like the blue whale heart. But we're following up on sort of unusual circulation systems in invertebrate animals. A former bird curator at the ROM had an interest in horseshoe crabs because their eggs are a primary food source for migratory birds such as red knots. But horseshoe crabs are also important from a medical perspective because of their blood. So you talk about this in the book. Can you elaborate a little bit more about horseshoe crabs and why they're so interesting?
Sure. I went into looking at horseshoe crabs thinking about something completely different. And that was the fact, I had this There was originally a chapter in the book about the Aztecs, and you'd always see these pictures of the priests up on top of the pyramids, and they're holding up this warrior's heart that they've just yanked out, and the thing is beating. And I thought, well, I can have a snarky line in here about why you never see Aztec priests holding up a horseshoe crab heart, because they would have stopped beating as soon as you take it out of the animal. And that's because the beat of a human heart is inherent. It comes from the pacemaker, which is built into the heart. And horseshoe crab hearts and other types of neurogenic hearts, they're called, are only beat when they're when a nerve impulse comes in from the outside. And so that's what I started out looking at. But what I found out was that, yes, since the 1960s, back then it was determined that there's a substance in their blood, which is blue, in another completely intriguing story, that is used, if it's isolated, it can be used to detect endotoxin. And endotoxins, I didn't even know what endotoxins were till I started to work on this book. And I thought it was something that was released by bacteria. And there's this long list of gram-negative bacteria that produce this substance. I didn't realize, though, that it's not something that they store and release to sort of, harm you. It's built into their cell membrane. And when you sterilize a catheter or something that has got bacteria on it, you literally burst that bacterial cell and release this substance that we've termed endotoxin. And if it gets into your circulatory system, it can kill you. And so good news for humans, but bad news for horseshoe crabs is that they found this substance in horseshoe crab blood that would clot when it came into contact with endotoxins. So now, because of that, they've got industrial, they literally have companies that are set up where they go and collect millions of horseshoe crabs, most of them during the mating season. They transport them by pickup truck or whatever to these facilities. They hang them, they drain their blood until it stops flowing. And then by law, they need to return them to the wild. But now they've lost 40% of their blood. They've been kept out of the water for 72 hours, and a lot of them are dying. So what is good for humans is now, bad news for what is really a living fossil. And we've been, that term gets thrown around a lot. But horseshoe crabs look like horseshoe crabs 500 million years ago, 250 million years before the first dinosaur. And now, because of the fact that there's something in their blood that is valuable, and yes, it saves lives, they're endangered. The good news is that there is now, through DNA technology, a test that can detect endotoxin without using horseshoe crab blood. And the other good news has to do with the problem that horseshoe crabs have that's not medically related, and that's that they're chopped up very, very commonly by eel fishermen and whelk fishermen to use as bait. And Cornell came up with a synthetic substance that mimics horseshoe crab blood. So, I was on a show the other night, and somebody came back and said they should name it, I can't believe it's not horseshoe crab. And this is something that is now being given out to these fishermen to try to keep them from, so you can put it on a roll of toilet paper and it smells like a horseshoe crab. And hopefully we move away from this, and horseshoe crabs being used medically go the way of the rabbit tests that were used to be used in pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah. So obviously there's a, big, science or medical connection, with hearts and circulation and stuff like that. And I know, science is your educational and professional background. But can you tell us something about sort of the artistic aspects that have been inspired by the heart, whether in literature or culturally?
Yeah, when I was writing the book about cannibalism, and I wondered why do we have this knee-jerk reaction when you hear the term cannibalism? And what came out of it was I was going to name this chapter "Blame It on the Greeks," and that changed. And so when I started to look for where this idea of cardiocentrism, the idea that emotion and the soul and intellect and memory all are based on the heart, I could have named the chapter "Blame It on the Ancient Egyptians," because it was really them. Who, that they were great medically, and here you can see that they really thought a lot about the heart, and here you can see the heart being weighed against the feather of Mutt, who was the goddess of truth and virtue, to sort of determine what was going to take place in the afterlife for you. Was it good or bad? And so the Egyptian medical information was held in really high esteem by the Greeks. And so some major leaguers like Aristotle and Hippocrates picked up on this idea of cardiocentrism, and they ran with it. And as they did, artists, Greek artists, scholars and writers and poets, and they all jumped on the bandwagon with the idea that the heart was central to things like emotion, especially strong emotion like love and hate. From there, the Romans picked up on it. And I don't really see a problem in that. Or, if you look at some of the songs of the day would sound a whole lot better with heart in them than brain. And you could just put a list together in your head of why the heart works. But the problem is that the Egyptians got a lot wrong, and that was picked up by the Greeks, passed on to the Romans, and within the Romans once Galen wrote about it, for reasons that I get into in the book, for the next 1,500 years, medicine was in a sense stagnant because everybody relied on Galen because his work had been declared to be divinely inspired. So for the next 1,500 years, we got a lot wrong as far as medicine went, and we did not do people were not allowed to do the research to get things right. That's to me where it came from. Artists were looking at this whole idea of cardiocentrism and running with it from there.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in your book, like maybe in the Middle Ages, that basically people weren't allowed to study the human heart, so they just had to extrapolate, from some other heart. Mm-hmm. But from a human perspective, there's been, some amazing, medical stories, about the heart. Can you share with us, like one of your favorite from the book?
Well, this is where I was so psyched when I started writing this, because, and I won't even get into this, is that there were so many instances in the animal kingdom where there's really strange stuff going on that we can use medically to treat humans, and so I've got a whole section on the zebra fish and the Antarctic ice fish and the Burmese python and all of that stuff. All of those stories were amazing. But the thing that really stood out to me is when I went to Harvard, I met with Dr. Harold Ott, and he's dealing with the problem that even with modern medicine, a lot of people die every year. Thousands of people die every year in North America waiting for transplants, whether they're heart transplants or kidneys or livers. And this is because of things like tissue typing and blood typing and refrigeration. So he's looking at it from a different angle. He's taking hearts of a cadaver. So in a sense, what would happen is if you pass away, you donate your heart not to a medical school, but you donate your heart to be used for this purpose. He's taken a heart of a cadaver. He's putting it through, in a sense, a detergent rinse that rinses out all of the cells and leaves this skeletal, almost, I don't want to say skeleton because you think bone, but a scaffold, a structure that's made up of only connective tissue that your body is not going to reject. Then he's taking the heart recipient, taking a sample of skin, converting that into stem cells, converting those stem cells into cardiac muscle cells, and then seeding that heart with these cells to, in a sense, grow your own heart to order. And he thinks that this is going to be, this will be happening within 10 years. So to me, that was the thing that, that I was most impressed with as far as future technology, that we're right on the, we're on the cusp of some amazing things.
Well, there are a lot of fascinating stories in your book, Bill. But I know that that our viewers have a lot of questions themselves. So unfortunately, we're going to have to stop our conversation, but we will pick it up with some viewer questions. So I'd like to thank you, Bill, for joining us in today's Curator Conversations, and hope that the virtual audience today will be able to visit the ROM special exhibitions, including Great Whales Up Close and Personal, this fall, to see not only the blue whale heart, but also the skeletons of 3 species of whales to get a better understanding of the biology and to learn about ways to help them in terms of marine conservation. But for now, we'll be answering some of your questions for the next few minutes. So as a reminder, you can submit your questions via the Q&A feature on your screen. So I will try to transition over to this feature here. Let me see how this thing works here. Okay, so the first question we have is, do we see something like a heart in the plant world? Great question.
Oh, great. It is great. In the plant world, there is a circulatory system in the xylem and phloem that are vessels that carry water or nutrients up and down. Nothing like a heart. But while we're on that topic, after I left Harvard with this heart that was being constructed, in a sense, from a cadaver heart from scratch, I went to a lab at Worcester Polytech where they're using the vessels that I just spoke about in particular in spinach leaves. And they are putting it through the same type of rinse to get rid of all of the cells, leaving behind the cellulose vessel, and then implanting those plant vessels with human vascular cells and growing tiny little blood vessels, which are very difficult to sort of reconnect if you've had an injury or you're trying to transplant them. So I don't believe it's heart, but certainly there's a circulatory system.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that might be a whole separate book down the road for you, Bill, on the plant heart.
Teeth are next.
Okay. The next question, this one is going to be is getting a little bit technical here. So this question is from a doctor. Who's fascinated by the beating of the blue whale heart under a huge, water pressure in the ocean. So the specific question is about the aortic bulb of the whale heart. Are you up on the aortic bulb?
No, I actually missed that day when I was in college when I was learning about the aortic bulb. No, I don't want to make light of it, but there's a lot that we don't know about the blue whale heart, and certainly there are people who are at the ROM who probably know far more about it than I do. I just know that some of the major vessels are there, of course, but there are vessels that you guys haven't been able to identify yet. So there's some mystery behind some of all of the blood vessels that you saw in that figure. But I'm sorry, I can't go on about that specific aspect of it.
We actually touched on it very briefly because there are some sort of unique or unusual things, just because the whales. And as he mentioned, from the diving aspect, but I think and Jackie, who he's really up on this. But the aortic bulb actually is it's sort of like a delayed. It allows a delayed reaction. It actually can store, I guess, sort of the energy. Because I think our aortic arch is pretty not rigid, but it's uniform throughout the length. But at the blue whale or whales in general, I think near the base, it's almost like a delayed elastic where it can sort of store up the blood, to give that extra, pump, to get all that blood, to the rest of the body. Because we show in our in the Great Whales exhibition, like we have different hearts, from a whale all the way down to a mouse. And then we have the volume of blood that's pumped with each stroke. So like a mouse heart is a little drop of blood, but the blue whale heart pumps like like in Toronto, we got these big blue recycling bins. So that is the amount of blood that's pumped, like a big blue recycling bin. And that's because of this aortic arch feature that I think most marine mammals have.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it now. I think the term aortic bulb just threw me off, and like you mentioned, this is a feature in mammalian hearts, is the fact that they're able to store energy, elastic energy, in those large vessels like the aorta, and then when they sort of contract, they stretch and stretch and stretch, and then they contract and they send that blood on its way. It's really an assist to the heart, which lets you think about how problematic it is when you have hardening of the arteries and you don't get that elastic distensibility to store that energy.
I think we might have a few doctors in the audience here, because the next question is, when I first held a cadaver heart, I was shocked that the aorta was 3 fingers across, much larger than I expected. What has surprised you the most about the human heart?
Oh, about the human heart. Oh, let me see. I think the thing that was so surprising to me was how similar it was to your typical primate heart, and it was the story that took place in 1984, Baby Faye, where Dr. Leonard Bailey out in Loma Linda in California transplanted an infant baboon heart into a desperately ill newborn. And it's not like he was showing off or trying a new technique. The baby would have died, almost died the night before. There was no way at that time to get infant donor hearts. There were really none. So he was trying to save this baby's life, and it got major media attention. And unfortunately, 20 days later, the baby died. For reasons that I talk about in the book that really didn't have to do with tissue rejection. But the good thing that came out of it was that there was so much media attention that they got that now, or starting in after this took place, a lot of infant donor hearts came in. And so Bailey would never had to do that type of a transplant before, which was a successful transplant. The heart was beating, it looked great. The baby, who had been, blue tinted because of the lack of oxygen, perked up, was eating. So I guess that's something that really amazed me, is that you'd never think that you'd be able to put a baboon heart into a human, but the similarities were striking.
Yeah, it's amazing modern medicine, what is possible nowadays. You had sort of mentioned, you had talked about this briefly for this next question about the squid having 3 hearts, which I did not know. So are there other species out there that have more than 1 heart?
Yeah, like I said, though, if you talk to a cardiologist, though, he's going to put quotation marks around what we're calling hearts. But there are contractile or pumping devices in insects, for example, that pump hemolymph, which is not really blood because it doesn't carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. It just carries nutrients and waste. But there are separate little pumps that pump hemolymph to the limbs, right, or to the antennae, to structures that are sort of far away from the body. So yeah, there are all sorts of examples in the animal kingdom about alternate. There's the squid, and you can see it's got these 2 brachial hearts that send blood that's returning from the body, deoxygenated, to the gills where it picks up oxygen, then to the systemic heart, which pumps it out to the body. So that's kind of a strange, but and this is an invertebrate, and we think that it has that it evolved that type of a system because of its high metabolism. These guys expend a lot of energy in their rapid swimming. So we think that you wouldn't be able to move around like a squid does if you didn't have a cool system like this.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that are pretty similar. So basically, it's do other species get heart disease like humans or
great question.
primates?
Well, I mean, all hearts get old, and so yeah. I don't think to the extent that humans do, because we have not evolved to eat the stuff that we eat now, and we have not evolved to be as sedentary as so many of us are. So that's not to say that there aren't heart problems in animals, especially pets, because some of the stuff that we feed them, and the fact that those animals become sedentary, they're sitting on your couch for half their lives, that leads to heart-related problems. But it's not like we have that we are the only creatures that have heart disease or die from heart disease, because this is a natural occurrence, is that the arteries harden, the heart doesn't beat that well, the valves break down. So it does occur in nature, and that's why probably some of the key reasons why animals die.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure if you know this, but we actually have another whale heart in our a collection of things.
Another reason for me to come up there. I can't wait.
Yeah, well, but we have a gray whale heart, so another species of whale. But it's still sitting frozen in, like one of those chest freezers that you might have in your basement, to freeze, whatever your meat from a hunt or something like this. And of course we haven't thought it out, and we haven't, the idea is to plastinate it too. But do you think that there might be a lot of differences, or not too many differences between the gray and the blue whale heart?
I don't know. Does it look like a soup dumpling?
Probably.
A 200-pound soup dumpling.
A frozen 200-pound soup dumpling.
Wow, how great. I mean, this is so great that you have something to compare it to, which is always a great way to study, as you know, study anatomy. Both of us do this type of thing, is to be able to make a comparison and see if there's been convergent evolution, or did they evolve, did they evolve these structures separately? So I'm not certain how closely related these whales are, but if they're really closely related, you would think that there are going to be some strong similarities, maybe just a difference in size. But I'm wondering if it's bifurcated like your blue whale heart, or if it collapses when you look at it wrong. But I think that's so great, and this is the first I'm hearing of it. I'm sure you guys are going to do an amazing job with it.
Well, we still have to wait, for the next exhibition, because Great Whales is just a temporary exhibition, so it's not a permanent gallery. But our idea down the road is hopefully we can have this stuff, here full time at the museum as a permanent gallery. Not just the skeletons, but also the whale heart.
Gunther von Hagens over at the Plastinarium in Germany is probably, doing one of these in order to get that heart over there. Of course, that's the company that did the amazing job on your heart.
Yeah, I mean, it took them about a year to actually plastinate. It was a slow process in like a pressurized container, to not only draw, the water up, but also to later on force in the silicone to preserve it. So it was a very, long, drawn out process.
With all sorts of dangerous chemicals. That's the thing that, using acetone, which is, crazy toxic.
Yeah, but the blue whale heart was the single largest, organism that he had done. Organ that he had done. So he had put together, parts of giraffes and stuff like that, but I don't think he didn't do it all at once. So I think it was something he had to build a special chamber, to put, the blue whale heart in. So the gray whale heart should be no problem for him, because that should fit in the chamber. He doesn't have to build a new chamber for that one.
He's an interesting story, that guy. He's going to have himself plastinated after he dies.
Yeah, I think he's probably already donated himself.
Oh yeah, he's already told his wife, "You've got 3 days with me, and then I'm being plastinated. So say goodbyes."
Okay, so there's a question. It is about did we dissect out the sperm whale and the right whale heart? So unfortunately, we didn't. The sperm whale, we didn't, because the sperm whale skeleton that we have on display, we actually salvaged that, back in 2001. So Mark Engstrom, who Bill had met when he come up here, so it was really Mark's idea to get, the whale exhibition going. So he has been slowly accumulating, different species. So I think we've got like 7 or 8 different species of whales. And of course, back in 2014, the blue whale, the biggest species, we didn't have. So that's why we were really eager to get that one. So down the road, we would like to get, these different skeletons on display, but unfortunately we didn't get the sperm whale. And then the right whale, by the time we got on site, they had already started the necropsy on the right whale. So we didn't get a chance to get that heart. But we will definitely keep our eyes open, and any possibilities of any other types of salvages we can do, because there are a lot of fascinating things that we've learned from not only the blue whale, But now we got the gray whale we need to study. We have a killer whale heart, which is part of the exhibition. So there's still a lot more. And as you mentioned, there's a lot we just don't know about just because nobody has, studied them. Okay, Bill, unfortunately, I think our time has run out. So thank you everybody for joining us on Curator Conversations. And we hope to see you again for our next virtual event. Details of all upcoming ROM at Home online programs can be found on our website and social media channels. Thanks again to Bill, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great being here.